Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we see the ramifications of still active after all these years, finally, in the Marvel series. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. The story we're looking at this time is entitled The Choice. It's Marvel issue number 90, and it's kind of a cool cover here. We got the ghost of Vader essentially kind of looming over everyone. Leia there sort of split in half, where there's her diplomat side with Akbar and Mon Mothma sort of leading the alliance, and the more action-packed Leia, where she's there with Luke and Han as they, race into danger and such. And kind of implies that she's going to be making a choice about, where she's going to fall in terms of being a diplomat or being a warrior. Now, these days you can find this as one of the issues in Star Wars Omnibus a long time ago, Volume 5, the last omnibus in this particular line. Now, at this point, Leia and Mon Mothma have been gone in the issue figurehead. They finally return here, actually wearing the same clothes, which is a nice touch there. It says Mary Jo Duffy with Bob McLeod doing the breakdowns and Tom Palmer doing the finished artwork. So, similar creative team in that respect. And we see Luke's X-Wing with Luke and Pliff aboard arrive, and we see another ship, which we now know carries Rick Duel, Danny, Cheeto, and Kiro, who was injured back in Still Active after all these years. And after that ridiculously bad I'll see you in the throne room piece of crap, in which Luke was somehow off on a whole nother planet on a different mission where he didn't quite look like himself and the art really stank, and he dealt with Scamp, who looked like a girl who was actually a boy. After that, we're finally back to the mainstream continuity of the Marvel series here, and Kiro's not looking so good. Kiro's been pretty banged up in the events of Still Active after all these years, saving literally the galaxy or the universe from another big bang. The way they describe it makes it sound like it's damage on a galactic scale, but then when they say Big Bang, you think universe, so it's kind of an up-in-the-air sort of thing. It's a decent little story. It all pretty much takes place on the planet of, or the moon, the forest moon of Endor, and Mon Mothma and Admiral Akbar are actually in the process now of getting together the representatives who are going to wind up putting together this new government, or at least start having input into what the new government is going to be like. And we have some tension as these soldiers who haven't had anything to do since the rebels won, except for Bakura and such, apparently. But of course they didn't know about that at this time. They're playing cards with Rick Duel and Danny and Cheeto, only to wind up thinking that Rick Duel is cheating, and you get a moment there in which they basically are trying to whoop each other's butts. And Kiro had been healed and awoken from his healing earlier, having asked Luke, "Can you train me as a Jedi? I felt the Force." And Luke says no. Luke isn't intending to because, it's too dangerous if he misuses it, and Luke doesn't feel like he could possibly be a good enough teacher, very much like, Obi-Wan thought he could be as good a teacher as Yoda, the way that he describes it to Luke at least, and look how that turned out with Vader, so Luke is very hesitant at this point. Kiro, though, is the one who steps in and is able to finally essentially save the day, or at least save the day diplomatically once Luke stops the fighting. He steps in as the one to say, yeah, we're all kind of hotheads now, but we shouldn't let our emotions get in our way, like he kind of did with Luke when he told off Luke when he said no. Kiro winds up sort of being brought back into the fold. He's back as a major character. He is healed, and he's sort of more on the positive side when it comes to Luke, which is good, because he's going to carry on that positive connection with Luke for the rest of his appearances, for the most part, in the series. He is one of these mainstay post-Return of the Jedi characters for the Marvel series. Unfortunately, a couple of other ramifications come out of this. One that is something that is not really ran with when it probably should have been, and another one that seems like it's going to be run with for a little bit, but the broader EU is going to wind up steamrolling over it later. By dealing with this little altercation, in theory, this should mean that because Luke and Leia were not part of this meeting, nor were Chewbacca, Lando, and Han Solo, they should not be allowed to be part of the new governing of the galaxy, or at least of setting up the new government for the galaxy, because that was one of the conditions of the meeting. You had to be there to be able to participate, and if you weren't, if you missed it, then you were out. And now, apparently, they are out, at least as of this issue. There's also a very interesting moment here, and it'd be nice to see how this is dealt with a little bit more in the EU. It's dealt with a little bit, but a lot of ways it's kind of glossed over. But, how do people find out about Luke and Leia being the children of Vader? When do they find out for each? When do they reveal it? Do they reveal it by choice, etc., etc.? There's kind of these different angles taken on it, but it seems like it's sort of a question that just sort of disappears and then pops up again that, yeah, they know. Yeah, people know. And, kind of later in the EU. There's a great discussion here between Luke and Leia, very reminiscent, really, of what we got in Return of the Jedi, where she's talking about how, she never wanted to be a fighter, but she kind of misses it now because diplomacy doesn't have the same kind of kick to it. She felt like she was making more of a difference when it came to the actual being out there fighting and whatnot. And there's that level there in which, she's thinking that, maybe the hard part is done now, so now what? Only Luke notes what she already knows, at least at heart, that the hard part of overthrowing the empire has just begun. It's easy to overcome the government. It's the hard thing to set up something new and long-lasting, in its place. And in determining where they're going to go from here, Luke makes the interesting point that they both have to be careful, not just him, because of their heritage, because of the Force running in both of them, albeit apparently stronger in Luke, at least to this point, because Leia hasn't really explored it, because of Vader being their father. And he says, you and I both have to be very cautious with what we do next. Members of our family are capable of accomplishing a great deal of good, but we also, if we take the wrong path, have the capacity for great evil. Our father didn't set out intending to become Darth Vader. She answers, but he did, and the Empire might never have become quite the power it was, or quite the horror, without Darth Vader's influence. At which point she asks the question that, again, it seems like it's glossed over. Luke, you haven't told anyone, have you, about Vader and us? And they have this great conversation about how Luke hasn't told anyone. Surely someday someone was going to know. He was horrified when he learned the truth. She was horrified upon learning the truth. People will learn it eventually, but it's not like they're going to go around and announce it all the time at this point. And that gives Leia a chance to kind of not worry about that and worry more about, is she going to be a figurehead? Is she going to be a political head? Is she going to be a freedom fighter? What exactly is she going to be going forward? We know, of course, she's going to focus on being a diplomat at one point, stay that for quite a while with action also tossed into that until she finally decides to be a Jedi much later in the continuity. But at this point, it's interesting to see them still grappling with that where does Leia go from here thing, because her role has sort of always been straddling the line between diplomat and warrior, and now the war, in theory, is over, at least the toppling Palpatine part. What role should she fall into now? I like the fact that they explored that at this point in the series, and yeah, the whole cheating at cards leading to an altercation where Kiro has to come in and, rise above himself is kind of a cheesy way to go along with the rest of the story. But it does bring Kiro back into the picture, gets him healthy, and gets him on good terms with Luke, but we know that he wants to be able to train as a Jedi, etc., etc. Kind of opens up the door for future plot lines that we're going to see throughout this era. Starting up with diplomacy, we really got a few issues here that have tried to lay down the threads of what's going to be coming a little bit later as it heads toward issue 107 and its grand finale. So, let's answer our usual question, is this story entitled The Choice an essential read? I actually think, yes it is. Having seen Kiro get injured previously, then now we need to know how he gets better, we need to see our characters brought back together, and if only for that conversation with Luke and Leia, it's essential to the development of those characters in a way that is rarely explored in the modern EU. This one does it very well, and has the most impact, I think, on the way we perceive those characters if we are reading these chronologically, or if we're reading them as they were initially released. In other words, before we get too far after Jedi, in terms of both publishing and chronology. I really like the way that they handled that particular discussion. So with that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.